We often suffer more in imagination than in reality. Seneca said that nearly 2,000 years ago, and somehow, it still feels written for us. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from, and what time is it for you right now? Over the next few hours, we'll explore 95 timeless philosophical ideas, wisdom from minds across centuries, each one designed to calm your thoughts, ease your worries, and help you see life a little more clearly as you slowly fall asleep. Let's begin. The ship of Theseus. Picture a ship. Not just any ship, but the legendary vessel that carried the hero Theseus back from Crete after he slayed the Minotaur. The ancient Athenians preserved this ship for centuries, but here's where it gets interesting. Over time, as wooden planks rotted and decayed, they replaced them. One plank here, another there. Eventually, after hundreds of years, every single piece of the original ship had been swapped out for new wood. The question the philosopher Plutarch asked in the 1st century is this: is it still the same ship? Now, bring this closer to home. Your body is doing exactly the same thing. Right now, as you lie here, your cells are dying and being replaced. Your skin cells regenerate every few weeks. Your red blood cells last about 4 months. Even your bones are constantly remodeling themselves. Within 7 to 10 years, the vast majority of your body's cells will have been replaced. The physical matter that makes up you right now is almost entirely different from the matter that made up you a decade ago. So here's the unsettling truth. Your physical continuity is an illusion. You're not the same collection of atoms you were as a child. You're not even the same collection you were last year. And yet, you feel like the same person. You have the same name, the same memories, the same sense of I that's been with you since you can remember. What makes you continuous? What is the thread that connects the child you were to the person lying here now? Is it your memories? But memories change, fade, even create themselves out of nothing. Is it your personality? But you've changed in 1,000 ways. Is it your consciousness? But what is consciousness if not a flow of different experiences, different thoughts, different moments of awareness? In our age of transformation, this question has never been more relevant. When someone undergoes extensive plastic surgery, are they still the same person? When you create a digital avatar that speaks, moves, and thinks like you, is it you? If we could upload your mind to a computer, would that digital consciousness be you? Or just a very convincing copy? The ship of Theseus doesn't just live in ancient philosophy books. It's the question at the heart of identity itself. What part of you from childhood still remains? Is there any piece at all that hasn't been replaced? Or are you a completely different ship, carrying only the name of the original? Anatta, no self. More than 2 millennia before Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. The Buddha taught the exact opposite. There is no I. The doctrine of anatta, or no self, is one of the most radical ideas in philosophy. It teaches that what we call the self is not a permanent essence, but a collection of ever-changing experiences, sensations, thoughts, emotions, and perceptions, all constantly in flux. There is no unchanging soul or core within us, only movement, reaction, and impermanence. To the ego, this idea is terrifying. If there's no fixed self, then who is listening? Who is breathing? Who suffers? And who is liberated? Yet, this is where the beauty of the teaching lies. By realizing there is no fixed you, you become free from the endless struggle of trying to protect, perfect, and defend an identity that never truly existed. We spend our lives trapped in stories. I'm shy. I'm ambitious. I'm not good enough. But these are not truths. They're passing narratives. The Buddha's insight invites you to drop the mask and experience reality directly, without labeling, without judgment. When you let go of the story, you stop living as the character and start seeing the play itself. In modern times, this concept is finding new expressions. In psychedelic therapy, where people describe moments of ego death, a dissolving of the self that brings overwhelming peace and connection. In meditation, when you observe thoughts arise and fade without identifying with them. Or even in virtual reality, where switching avatars can momentarily dissolve your sense of fixed identity. Anatta is not nihilism. It doesn't mean you don't exist. It means you don't exist the way you think you do. Like a wave on the ocean, you are not separate from the whole. You are the ocean, momentarily appearing as a wave. So ask yourself, who would you be without your story about yourself? Without the labels, the memories, the definitions? What remains when the voice in your head grows silent? Perhaps, in that silence, you'll find the freedom the Buddha was pointing toward all along. Cogito ergo sum. In the winter of 1637, René Descartes sat alone by the fire, questioning everything he thought he knew. His senses could deceive him. His memories could lie. The world outside could be a dream. Maybe even his own body was an illusion. In that moment of radical doubt, one truth remained unshakable. I think, therefore I am. Cogito ergo sum. No matter how uncertain the universe may seem, Descartes realized that the very act of doubting proves the existence of the doubter. Even if everything else is false, the awareness that experiences the doubt must be real. This simple statement became one of the foundations of Western philosophy, asserting consciousness as the only indubitable truth. But centuries later, the same question echoes in new forms. In the digital age, where we question whether reality itself might be a simulation. Even if we were living inside a hyperreal computer program, Descartes' insight would still hold true. The simulation might be fake, but the experience of consciousness within it is undeniably real. The observer can never be doubted. Modern neuroscience still can't fully explain this mystery. How does matter, mere atoms and neurons, create the vivid inner world of color, emotion, and thought? Science can describe the mechanics, but not the miracle. Descartes may have been wrong about many things, but he was right about one. Consciousness is the great undeniable fact of existence. Take a moment to observe your own awareness right now. Behind every sound, every breath, every flicker of thought, something is there, noticing it all. What exists in the space between your thoughts? That's silent awareness. That's where Descartes found certainty in a world of doubt. The homunculus fallacy. Picture this. Inside your head, there's a tiny version of you, sitting in a chair, watching everything your eyes see, like a little man in a control room. Sounds silly, right? Yet this is how most people unconsciously imagine consciousness, as though there's an inner observer behind the eyes, separate from the experience itself. Philosopher Gilbert Ryle called this the homunculus fallacy, the mistake of imagining a little person inside your head perceiving the world. But if such a homunculus existed, it would need another, even smaller one inside it to perceive its experiences, leading to an infinite regress. Consciousness, Ryle argued, doesn't work that way. There is no separate observer inside you. The seeing is the awareness. The hearing is the awareness. There is no middleman. Think of watching a movie. You don't need another screen inside your head to view what's already unfolding. You simply experience it directly. Consciousness is not a thing, it's a process. In meditation, this realization becomes vivid. When you stop trying to watch your thoughts and simply be the awareness in which they arise, something dissolves. The gap between observer and observed disappears. There is only presence, seamless, effortless, self-luminous. In modern psychology, this understanding is essential. The more we identify with the watcher, the more fragmented we become, split between who we are and who we think we should be. But when you realize there's no inner homunculus, no watcher behind the curtain, only pure awareness, the mind becomes still. So, who is aware of your awareness right now? Look closely, and you'll find no one. Awareness doesn't belong to you. It simply is. Proprioception of the self. French phenomenologist Maurice Merleau-Ponty believed that to truly understand the self, we must return to the body, because the body isn't just something we have, it's something we are. Your body is not a vessel carrying your mind. It's the very foundation of your consciousness. You don't simply think about the world, you feel it, move through it, exist in it. Your sense of self is deeply embodied, grounded in the silent intelligence of your physical being. Consider proprioception, your body's ability to sense its position in space. You can close your eyes and still know where your hands are. You can walk in the dark and feel the angle of your posture without seeing it. This innate awareness, not of the world outside, but of the self inside, is a form of consciousness as ancient as life itself. Merleau-Ponty argued that our modern obsession with digital life, screens, avatars, endless mental stimulation, pulls us away from this embodied wisdom. We live disembodied lives, floating in virtual spaces, disconnected from the raw physicality that gives our existence depth and meaning. When you forget your body, you forget reality. You drift into abstraction. But when you reconnect, when you breathe deeply, feel your heartbeat, notice the ground beneath your feet, you return home to yourself. Your body is not separate from your awareness. It's the doorway to it. Without the living body, there is no experience at all. So right now, take a breath. Feel your chest rise and fall. Notice how your body knows exactly where it is without you having to think. That's not something you do. That's what you are. The narrative self. Every human life is a story in motion. French philosopher Paul Ricoeur believed that identity is not a static object we discover. It's a narrative we continuously compose. You are both the author and the protagonist of your life. Every memory, decision, and turning point becomes a line in the story you tell yourself about who you are. Think about it. Your identity isn't a collection of isolated facts. It's a sequence of meaning. When you say, "I am who I am because of what I've been through," you're weaving your experiences into a coherent plot. The heartbreaks, the victories, the failures, all become chapters. But what makes Ricoeur's idea so powerful is this: the story is never finished. You are constantly revising it. Every new event changes the meaning of the past. What once felt like a tragedy may later become your greatest lesson. You can't rewrite the events, but you can rewrite the interpretation, and that changes everything. Modern life amplifies this narrative instinct. Social media is a living diary of identity, curated, filtered, constantly edited. Every post, every caption, every selfie is a deliberate act of storytelling. We're not just living life. We're performing it, narrating it, shaping how others, and we ourselves, perceive who we are. But this storytelling power can also heal. In trauma therapy, reframing your past, telling a new version of the story, helps people reclaim agency. "This happened to me," transforms into "this shaped me." The facts don't change, but the meaning does. So, what story have you been telling yourself about who you are? Is it one of limitation or transformation? Are you writing a tragedy or an epic still unfolding? Because if identity is narrative, then freedom lies in authorship. You are not bound by the story you inherited. You can choose to write a new one. The observing self versus the thinking self. There are two versions of you living inside your mind. The first is the thinking self, the part that plans, analyzes, worries, and narrates. It's the constant voice in your head commenting on everything you do. The second is the observing self, silent, spacious, aware. It doesn't judge or interfere, it simply notices. It watches the thoughts come and go, the emotions rise and fall. In acceptance and commitment therapy, this distinction is vital. The thinking self is like a storm, full of movement and noise. The observing self is the sky, unchanged, vast, and untouched no matter how violent the storm becomes. From the time you were a child, everything about you has changed: your body, your beliefs, your habits, your memories. Yet there's something that has remained constant: the pure awareness that has been watching it all. When you were 5, you watched your world through innocent eyes. When you were 15, you watched your fears and confusion. When you were 25, your ambitions, your doubts. The content changed, but the watcher never did. This is the foundation of mindfulness. It's not about stopping thoughts. It's about noticing them without attachment. Like clouds drifting across the sky, thoughts pass through awareness, but they are not you. Buddhism describes this state as pure witnessing, the direct realization that consciousness is not the mind's chatter, but the stillness beneath it. In that stillness, you are not the thinker, but the one who sees the thinking. So right now, try this. Become aware of your thoughts as if they were voices echoing in the distance. Can you observe them without being pulled in? Can you let them pass like clouds? That quiet presence behind it all, that's the real you. Qualia. Close your eyes and imagine the color red. Not the word red, not the wavelength of light, but the actual feeling of redness. Now think of the taste of chocolate, the warmth of sunlight, the sound of your favorite song. These are qualia, the raw, subjective experiences of consciousness. Philosopher Thomas Nagel described this in his famous essay, What Is It Like to Be a Bat? He argued that no matter how much science we know about a bat's brain, we can never truly know what it feels like to be one. That feeling, that what it's like, is the essence of consciousness. Science can measure brain activity, map neural circuits, and predict behavior, but it can't explain why experience feels like anything at all. Why does the electrical firing of neurons produce the taste of sweetness or the ache of nostalgia? Why does consciousness exist when the universe could have worked perfectly fine without it? This is known as the hard problem of consciousness, a mystery even the most advanced AI systems cannot solve. Machines can process data, recognize faces, and even mimic emotions, but they don't feel. They can simulate understanding, but they don't experience qualia. Yet qualia are the most intimate truth of your existence. You don't merely observe life, you feel it. You don't just register warmth, you experience comfort. You don't just process color, you see beauty. Every moment of awareness is a miracle science cannot quantify. And that means consciousness might not just be a byproduct of the brain. It might be something deeper, something fundamental to reality itself. Your inner experience is both the most personal and the most unexplainable fact of your existence. Perhaps that mystery, the simple what it's like of being you, is where the universe becomes self-aware. The divided self. Imagine living in two worlds, one inside, one outside. Inside, you feel raw, alive, vulnerable. Outside, you perform. You smile, nod, adjust your tone, manage your image. Over time, the gap between these worlds widens, and you start to feel split, divided between who you are and who you pretend to be. R.D. Laing, the Scottish psychiatrist, called this the divided self. He saw it as one of the central struggles of modern life, the exhaustion of maintaining masks just to survive in society. We build personas to be accepted, the competent employee, the good friend, the confident adult. But behind these roles, there's often quiet fatigue. Because every mask requires energy. Every performance creates distance between your true experience and your projected image. In an age of personal branding, this division has deepened. Online, we're curators of ourselves, constantly performing happiness, confidence, and control. But privately, anxiety and emptiness grow. The more we project perfection, the less space we leave for authenticity. Laing believed that mental illness often arises from this split, when the false self becomes so dominant that the real self feels suffocated. Healing, then, isn't about fixing the false self. It's about remembering the real one. You begin to heal when you allow yourself to be unpolished, uncertain, human. When you stop performing long enough to feel what's true. Ask yourself, how much of your day is spent performing versus being? How often do you say what you really think? Or feel what you really feel? Authenticity isn't something you find. It's something you stop hiding. Atman and Brahman. In the ancient Hindu Upanishads, there's a simple yet profound statement. Tat tvam asi, you are that. It means your individual soul, Atman, is not separate from the universal consciousness, Brahman. The deepest layer of your being is not personal at all. It is cosmic. You are not a wave on the ocean. You are the ocean expressing itself as a wave. Every thought, every heartbeat, every breath is not happening to you, but as you, as part of the same infinite awareness that animates all things. This realization, that Atman and Brahman are one, is the heart of non-duality. It dissolves the illusion of separation. The boundaries between me and the world vanish, because there was never truly a line dividing them. Modern science, in its own way, hints at this unity. Quantum physics suggests that everything in the universe is interconnected, that the observer and the observed cannot be fully separated. The mystics said the same thing thousands of years ago. Consciousness is not inside you. You are inside consciousness. When you truly see this, fear begins to fade. Because how can you fear life when you are life itself? What if everything you perceive, the trees, the sky, the thoughts in your head, are made of the same awareness perceiving them? What if you are not in the universe, but the universe is in you? In that realization, the search for self ends, because you were never anything less than infinite. Memento Mori, Stoicism, Ancient Rome. In the heart of ancient Rome, among marble statues and echoing halls, Stoic philosophers whispered a phrase that was both sobering and liberating. Memento Mori, remember that you will die. At first, it sounds morbid, but to the Stoics, it was the opposite, a reminder to truly live. Death was not meant to terrify, it was meant to clarify. When you hold mortality close, distractions lose their power. The trivial dissolves, and what truly matters comes into focus. Marcus Aurelius, Rome's philosopher-emperor, wrote in his private journal, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think." Imagine that awareness guiding every choice you make, the urgency, the sincerity, the stripping away of pretense. In our modern world, we avoid this truth. We fill our days with noise, endless scrolling, deadlines, worries about things that won't matter a month from now. We act as though we'll live forever, while time quietly takes its due. But the Stoics knew better. Death is the ultimate advisor. It reminds you to live deliberately. Psychologists call this mortality salience. When we're reminded of our own death, we paradoxically become more grateful and more alive. People start valuing relationships over possessions, moments over metrics. Life suddenly feels urgent and beautiful. So, ask yourself, if you had just 1 year left, what would you stop doing tomorrow? What excuses would vanish? What truths would you finally speak? Memento Mori isn't about fearing the end. It's about realizing that life's value comes because it ends. Every sunrise, every breath, every heartbeat, a gift that will not repeat. Heraclitus's river, pre-Socratic Greece, 500 BC. 5 centuries before Christ, the Greek philosopher Heraclitus stood beside a flowing river and uttered a sentence that would echo through millennia. You cannot step into the same river twice. The river is always moving. New water, new flow, new moment. And so are you. By the time you lift your foot to step in again, both you and the river have changed. This was Heraclitus's great insight. Change is not just part of life, it is life. Everything flows, nothing stands still. Permanence is the grand illusion. We spend our days trying to freeze what cannot be frozen. Youth, love, success, security. We clutch at photographs, chase nostalgia, resist endings. But in our effort to stop time, we end up fighting reality itself. And resistance to change, Heraclitus would say, is the root of all suffering. Look around you. Everything you see, from the stars in the sky to the cells in your body, is in motion. The universe itself is a vast current of transformation. To live well is not to resist the flow, but to flow with it. In modern life, this truth feels especially relevant. Technology evolves daily, identities shift, trends die overnight. The world is changing faster than ever, and those who cling to how things were get swept away in frustration. The ones who learn to adapt, to surf the current rather than fight it, move gracefully with time. So, ask yourself, what are you trying to keep frozen that wants to flow? A version of yourself? A relationship? A dream that's already transformed? The river never stops. You can fight it, or you can let it carry you. And in that surrender, you find peace. Anatta, impermanence. In the teachings of the Buddha, there's a word that captures the essence of existence. Anatta, impermanence. Everything that arises must pass away. Every sound fades into silence. Every emotion dissolves. Every breath ends as another begins. Impermanence is not a flaw in the design, it is the design. We suffer because we forget this. We cling to moments, people, and pleasures as if they'll last forever. We want love without loss, joy without change, life without death. But in truth, it's impermanence that gives everything its beauty. Think of a sunset. If it lasted forever, would you still find it beautiful? Or a cherry blossom? Part of its magic lies in its fleetingness. Because it will fall, you notice it more deeply while it's here. Modern mindfulness teachers echo this wisdom. The awareness of impermanence deepens appreciation. When you realize this exact moment will never return, you begin to inhabit it fully. The sound of the rain, the warmth of tea, the touch of a loved one, all become sacred. Impermanence also frees you, because no pain, no heartbreak, no despair lasts forever. The same law that takes away your joy will also carry away your sorrow. The river keeps moving. So ask yourself, can you love something more by knowing you'll lose it? Can you see beauty not in spite of endings, but because of them? The Buddha once said, all conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. To live wisely, then, is to fall in love with what is passing, to bow to the transient and say, thank you for being here at all. Being toward death. Martin Heidegger, the 20th century German philosopher, believed that death is not merely something that happens at the end of life. It's something that shapes life from the very beginning. He called this realization being toward death. To live authentically, Heidegger said, one must face mortality, not flee from it. Because only when you confront death do you truly grasp the preciousness of existence. Most people, he argued, live in what he called the they, the anonymous crowd. They follow routines, chase approval, live according to others' expectations. Their lives unfold on autopilot, guided not by their own choices, but by the collective momentum of society. But death individualizes you. No one can die your death. It is the one experience that cannot be shared, borrowed, or postponed. It is yours alone. And in facing that, you remember that your life is yours, too. When you stop running from the fact of mortality, you stop living someone else's script. You begin to ask, what do I want? What is my truth? You no longer drift through existence as they do. You begin to exist as you. Modern psychology echoes Heidegger's insight. Studies show that people who reflect on their mortality live with greater purpose, take more meaningful risks, and prioritize connection over status. Confronting death doesn't make life darker. It makes it more vivid. So, ask yourself, are your choices truly yours? Or are you living someone else's idea of a life? When you accept that the river will one day carry you to its end, you start swimming with intention, not fear. You begin, at last, to live. Eternal return. Now imagine this. One night, as you lie awake, a voice whispers, you must live this life again, exactly as it is. Every joy, every pain, every mistake, every moment, repeated infinitely. This was Friedrich Nietzsche's haunting idea of the eternal return. It's not meant as science, but as a test, a mirror to your soul. If you had to relive your life forever, would you curse it or embrace it? For Nietzsche, this thought experiment was the ultimate measure of how deeply you've said yes to life. To affirm existence so completely that you would gladly live it again, even with all its suffering, that is the highest form of strength. He called this Amor Fati, the love of fate. Not resignation, not passivity, but radical acceptance. To look at every wound, every failure, every heartbreak, and say, this, too, I choose. Modern psychology supports this wisdom. Those who practice acceptance, gratitude, and presence, rather than regret and resistance, report greater happiness and resilience. When you stop wishing life were different, you start living it fully. Eternal return asks a simple but piercing question. Are you living a life you would want to repeat? If not, what would you need to change to say yes to it? Because the truth is, we do live our choices again and again, not through reincarnation, but through habit. The same patterns, the same reactions, the same regrets, cycling endlessly. Until you decide to live consciously, the loop continues. So imagine eternity pressing its weight upon you. The same morning sun, the same small joys, the same losses, over and over. Would you smile? Would you love it all, even the pain? That's Nietzsche's challenge, to live so honestly, so courageously, that if the universe asked, would you do it all again? Your answer would be a quiet, unshakable yes. Kairos versus Chronos, ancient Greek concepts. The Greeks had two words for time, chronos and kairos. Chronos is the ticking clock, the seconds slipping away, the calendar pages turning. It's measurable, predictable, and linear. This is the kind of time we live by: alarm clocks, deadlines, schedules. But Kairos is something entirely different. It's the sacred time, the right moment, when everything aligns. It's the instant when your actions, emotions, and the universe seem to whisper in unison, now. Imagine you're watching the sunset with someone you love. The world is quiet. Time feels suspended. That's Kairos. No clock could measure that moment because it wasn't about duration, it was about depth. Ancient philosophers believed that Chronos fills your life, but Kairos gives it meaning. In our modern world, we've become slaves to Chronos. Productivity culture measures our worth in hours worked and tasks completed. But Kairos reminds us that not all hours are equal. Some seconds change everything. When a musician loses themselves in the flow of creation, when a child laughs uncontrollably, when you're fully present, those are moments outside the tyranny of the clock. Kairos is life's poetry sneaking into its prose. The irony? You can't force Kairos. You can only invite it by slowing down, noticing beauty, and letting go of control. When was the last time you lost track of time completely? Maybe that's where you truly lived. The arrow of time, physics meets philosophy. In physics, time only moves in one direction, forward. This one-way motion is known as the arrow of time, and it's tied to entropy, the tendency of the universe to move from order to disorder. Ice melts, stars burn out, bodies age. The past is always behind us, and the future remains hidden. But here's the strange part. Most of the fundamental equations of physics work both ways. They don't require time to move forward. If you reverse them, they'd still make sense. So why can't we remember the future the way we remember the past? Philosophers and scientists suggest that the arrow of time is psychological as much as physical. Our consciousness is wired to experience a one-way flow, from what has happened to what is yet to be. The universe itself might not care which way time moves, but we do, because our memories are stored in one direction, not both. Some even propose the block universe theory, that past, present, and future all exist simultaneously, like pages in a book. You just happen to be reading one page at a time. Free will, then, becomes an illusion of perspective. The story is already written, you just haven't reached the next chapter yet. And yet, we feel the movement. We grow. We change. We choose. Maybe the truth lies somewhere in between. The future might be written, but how you read it is up to you. Is the future already written, or are you writing it right now with every breath you take? Mono no aware, Japanese aesthetics. The Japanese have a phrase that captures something few languages can express. Mono no aware, the gentle sadness of things, the awareness that all beauty is fleeting. Cherry blossoms bloom brilliantly for just a few days before falling. The Japanese celebrate this fragility, not mourn it, because the blossom's impermanence is their beauty. Mono no aware is not despair, it's tenderness. It's the quiet ache when summer ends, when a friend moves away, when you realize a moment has already become a memory. It teaches us to love what fades precisely because it fades. Our culture avoids this awareness. We glorify youth, permanence, and endless growth. But the truth is, everything you love, your body, your relationships, your dreams, will one day dissolve. The wisdom of mono no aware lies in realizing that this transience gives life its flavor. A falling leaf, an old photograph, an abandoned building, all whisper the same truth. Nothing lasts forever, but everything shines for a moment. So instead of clinging, we can appreciate. Instead of mourning, we can cherish. The awareness of impermanence doesn't make life sad. It makes it sacred. What ending in your life contained unexpected beauty? Maybe loss is just love's shadow, reminding you how deeply you cared. The Immortality Project. Ernest Becker argued that everything humans create, religion, art, nations, even social media, is part of one grand illusion, our attempt to deny death. He called this the Immortality Project. Deep down, we know we're temporary. Every heartbeat echoes mortality, and that terrifies us. So we build monuments, write books, start families, chase fame, all in hopes of leaving something behind that will outlive us. Ancient Egyptians built pyramids. Today, we build Instagram profiles. Both are attempts to etch our names into eternity's wall. But Becker warned that this pursuit can enslave us. When your self-worth depends on being remembered, you're already at war with time. Real freedom comes not from escaping death, but from accepting it. Think of a musician who plays not to be famous, but simply because they love the sound. That's immortality in the moment, when your act itself becomes eternal through presence. Maybe the true legacy isn't what you leave behind, but the depth with which you live while you're here. What are you building to outlast yourself? And is it worth the life you're spending to build it? The Eternal Now, Meister Eckhart, Christian Mysticism. Meister Eckhart, the 13th century mystic, once said, "There exists only the present instant, a now which always and without end is itself new." To him, the past and future are illusions, mental constructs that keep us from touching the only reality that ever truly exists, this moment. Think about it. The past is memory, the future is imagination. Both exist only in thought. The present is all that's ever real, and yet it's the one place we rarely live. Our minds jump from regret to worry, skipping over the eternal now unfolding quietly beneath it all. Eckhart believed that God, truth, and reality dwell only in the now. Every second you spend elsewhere, you drift further from the sacred. Modern teachers like Eckhart totally revived this wisdom, teaching that liberation comes from stepping out of psychological time. You don't need to chase peace. You just need to stop leaving the moment where peace already lives. Close your eyes. Feel your breath. Hear the sounds around you. Notice, this is eternity disguised as an instant. When you stop measuring life by hours and start feeling it through moments, time dissolves, and what's left is pure being. Plato's cave, ancient Greece, the Republic. Imagine a group of prisoners chained inside a dark cave. They've been there since birth, facing a blank wall. Behind them burns a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners, other people pass carrying objects that cast shadows on the wall. The prisoners can only see the shadows, and they give them names, believing the shadows are reality itself. Now imagine one prisoner is freed. He stumbles outside into the sunlight, blinded at first, disoriented, terrified. But then, as his eyes adjust, he sees colors, depth, trees, clouds. For the first time, he sees reality. When he returns to tell the others, they laugh at him. They cling to their shadows, comfortable in illusion. Plato's allegory isn't just about philosophy, it's about us. Most people live in mental caves of assumption, habit, and social conditioning. They mistake media images, trends, and cultural narratives for truth. The fire has been replaced by screens, the shadows by algorithms. We scroll endlessly, mistaking what we see for what is. Escaping the cave hurts. It requires questioning everything, your beliefs, your news sources, your inherited worldview. But freedom begins with discomfort, the burning light that reveals the walls you didn't know you were staring at. The scariest part? You may never fully escape, but each time you doubt, each time you look deeper, a little more light enters. What shadow in your life might you be mistaking for the real thing? Epistemological humility. Socrates, I know that I know nothing. Socrates was once called the wisest man in Athens. He laughed when he heard that. If I am wise, he said, it's only because I know that I know nothing. That single line changed the course of philosophy forever. Because Socrates wasn't promoting ignorance, he was revealing arrogance. The more certain a person becomes, the more blind they often are. In every era, certainty has been the enemy of growth. Once people knew the earth was flat, Knew illness came from curses. Knew the sun revolved around us. Certainty ends inquiry. Humility fuels it. Today, the same arrogance exists, but hidden behind confidence, credentials, and online debates. We confuse information with understanding. The Dunning-Kruger effect proves it. The less we know, the more we think we know. Epistemological humility doesn't mean doubting everything. It means holding knowledge gently. It means saying, I could be wrong, and meaning it. It's the mental flexibility to change your mind when evidence changes. The world isn't divided between the smart and the stupid. It's divided between the curious and the closed-minded. What are you most certain about that you might, just possibly, be wrong about? Maya, illusion, Hindu Vedanta philosophy. In the Hindu tradition, Maya is the great illusion, the cosmic game that makes the transient world appear solid and separate. But Maya doesn't mean the world is fake. It means it's not what it seems. Imagine walking in twilight and mistaking a coiled rope for a snake. You jump, your heart races, but when you look closely, it's just rope. The snake never existed. It was a trick of perception. That's Maya. Every day, we mistake appearances for essence. We think beauty equals worth, success equals happiness, ownership equals security. We chase shadows, terrified by snakes that aren't there. The sages taught that liberation begins when you see through the illusion, not by escaping the world, but by recognizing that your perceptions don't define it. Modern science echoes this. Your senses don't show you reality. They show you a model your brain constructs. Virtual reality, deepfakes, and AI-generated worlds blur the line even further. The question, what is real, isn't philosophical anymore. It's technological. Maybe all your problems, fear, anger, jealousy, are snakes in the half-light of perception. When seen clearly, they dissolve. What if the problems you're fighting aren't real, but projections of the mind's own shadow? Phenomenology, Edmund Husserl, early 20th century. Husserl's revolution began with a simple command: back to the things themselves. He wasn't interested in theories about experience. He wanted to explore experience as it appears. Phenomenology is the study of consciousness, not through logic or measurement, but through direct observation. Husserl urged us to bracket assumptions, to pause our judgments, and simply see. For instance, when you drink a cup of coffee, don't label it hot, bitter, or good. Just notice the warmth on your fingers, the rising steam, the aroma curling into your nostrils. That's pure perception before thought colors it. This practice is strikingly similar to mindfulness meditation. Before the mind classifies, reality just is. A sound is just vibration. A thought is just a cloud passing. Experience, raw and unfiltered, is the foundation of all truth. Phenomenology teaches that what you call reality is a collaboration between the world and your consciousness. You're not a detached observer. You're a participant in creation itself. In a world of distractions, where we scroll instead of see and react instead of feel, this philosophy is an invitation. Return to the moment. Return to the things themselves. Can you experience something before naming it? Try it now. Feel the air on your skin before you call it cool. The veil of perception, John Locke, empiricism. John Locke believed that you never perceive objects directly. You only perceive the ideas your mind forms about them. When you see a tree, you're not actually seeing the tree itself. You're seeing light waves interpreted by your brain as tree. It's like watching a movie. The image feels real, but you're actually seeing light on a screen. Between you and the world stands an invisible filter, your senses, your brain, your interpretation. That's the veil of perception. You live behind this veil every day. You never truly touch reality. You touch your experience of it. Everything you've ever seen, loved, or feared happened inside your mind's translation of the world. This idea reshaped philosophy and psychology alike. If perception can't be trusted fully, then knowledge must always be tentative. And if each mind perceives differently, then reality is plural, not shared, but overlapping. Modern neuroscience confirms it. Our brains don't record reality like cameras. they construct it. The color blue, the taste of sweetness, even the sense of time, all of it is created within your mind. So when two people argue about truth, they're often defending different translations of the same event. Understanding this doesn't make truth meaningless. It makes compassion possible. The color you call blue, does it look the same in someone else's mind? Or do you both live in uniquely painted worlds, forever separated by perception? Confirmation bias, psychology meets philosophy. We like to believe we're rational creatures, carefully weighing evidence, forming opinions based on logic. But in truth, the human mind doesn't seek truth, it seeks comfort. And comfort often wears the mask of certainty. Confirmation bias is the invisible force shaping what you read, what you believe, even who you become. It's the tendency to seek out information that confirms your existing worldview, and to ignore, dismiss, or distort anything that contradicts it. Imagine your beliefs as walls, and your mind as a loyal architect, always looking for bricks that fit. It will reject any shape that doesn't match the design. Over time, those walls become thicker, higher, soundproof. You stop seeing through them. You start living inside them. That's why two people can read the same article, watch the same event, or hear the same story and come away with opposite conclusions. We don't see the world as it is. We see it as we are. In the digital age, confirmation bias has evolved into a system. Algorithms curate your reality, feeding you what you already agree with, strengthening your convictions until they harden into dogma. This is how echo chambers form, how extremism grows, how nuance dies. True intellectual courage isn't defending your beliefs, it's challenging them. It's searching for the argument that scares you most and listening. When was the last time you actively sought out a view that opposed your own? Maybe that's where truth begins, where your certainty ends. The Tao that can be told, Lao Tzu, Tao Te Ching. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. With this single line, Lao Tzu shattered the arrogance of human language. He was saying, the moment you try to describe truth, you've already stepped away from it. Words are maps, not territories, pointers, not destinations. The Tao is the way of existence itself, the flow of reality, beyond definition or doctrine. Once you name it, you've already reduced it. Try to describe a sunset, and it becomes less than what you saw. Try to explain love, and you've already left it. Language divides, the Tao unites. Words create opposites, light and dark, good and evil, success and failure. But the Tao transcends these binaries. It contains them both. Modern life worships articulation. We tweet, argue, analyze. We believe if we can name something, we can control it. But Lao Tzu reminds us, the deepest truths can only be felt. Silence is not ignorance. Sometimes it's the highest form of understanding. There are truths that exist only in stillness, in the pause between thoughts, in the gaze of awe, in the breath before words. What truth have you experienced that you can't quite explain? Maybe that's the one that matters most. The hermeneutic circle, Hans-Georg Gadamer, hermeneutics. Gadamer proposed that understanding anything, whether a text, a person, or a culture, is a circular process. To understand the whole, you must understand the parts. But to understand the parts, you must first understand the whole. It sounds paradoxical, but this hermeneutic circle reflects how humans actually make sense of the world. When you read a novel, your interpretation of each sentence depends on your sense of the story. But your sense of the story changes with every sentence you read. Understanding is not static. It's a dance between what you already know and what you're learning. This means no interpretation is ever final. You bring your past, your beliefs, your culture into every act of understanding. Two people can read the same poem and see completely different meanings, not because one is wrong, but because each is standing in a different historical and emotional context. The hermeneutic circle is not a trap, it's a spiral. Each return to the text, or to life itself, brings deeper understanding. We interpret, reinterpret, and in doing so, evolve. So when you disagree with someone's interpretation, remember, they aren't blind. They're standing in a different part of the circle. Your current understanding shapes what you're capable of understanding next. The Munchausen trilemma, Hans Albert, Epistemology. Imagine trying to justify every belief you hold. You start with one reason, but that reason itself needs a justification, and that one needs another. And before long, you're trapped in an infinite regress. Hans Albert called this dilemma the Munchausen trilemma, named after the mythical Baron Munchausen, who supposedly pulled himself out of a swamp by his own hair. The idea is simple yet devastating. Every attempt to prove something ultimately ends in one of three unsatisfying outcomes. First, infinite regress. You keep asking why, forever, with no foundation. Second, circular reasoning. Your argument eventually loops back on itself. Third, an arbitrary stopping point. That's just how it is. Every belief system, scientific, religious, or personal, rests on unprovable foundations. The axioms of math, the laws of logic, even the belief that your senses show reality, all are assumptions you can't justify without using them. The trilemma doesn't mean truth is unreachable, it means certainty is. The wise response is not despair, but humility. To live without absolute proof is not weakness, it's maturity. You don't need unshakable foundations to stand. You just need awareness of the ground's fragility beneath your feet. What do you believe that you simply can't prove? Maybe that's where your faith, in science, in love, in life, quietly begins. Perspectivism, Friedrich Nietzsche, 19th century. There are no facts, only interpretations. Nietzsche's perspectivism wasn't a denial of truth, it was a recognition of its complexity. He saw that every claim to truth is spoken from somewhere, from a body, a history, a bias, a need. A scientist, a monk, a soldier, a poet, they all experience the same world through different lenses. Their truths are not false, but incomplete. Perspectivism doesn't flatten truth into meaninglessness, it deepens it. It invites us to look at the mosaic of viewpoints and ask not who's right, but what truth does each perspective reveal? In modern times, this insight is both vital and dangerous. On one hand, it helps us understand bias, culture, and identity. On the other, it tempts us into relativism, believing all views are equal. Nietzsche warned against that. Some perspectives expand life, others shrink it. Some nourish strength and creativity, others breed resentment and decay. Wisdom lies in seeking broader perspectives, not clinging to one, but collecting many until they reveal a fuller horizon. So whose perspective have you never seriously considered? Perhaps the truth you've been missing is hiding inside the worldview you've never dared to enter. Radical freedom, Jean-Paul Sartre, Existentialism. Jean-Paul Sartre believed that human beings are condemned to be free. At first, that sounds like a contradiction. How can freedom be a punishment? But for Sartre, freedom isn't the Hollywood version of doing whatever you want. It's the terrifying realization that there is no fixed script, no divine plan, no essence written before you were born. You arrive in the world blank, and every decision you make writes your identity in real time. He argued that existence precedes essence. A knife is made with a purpose, to cut. But you were not born with one. You define it through your actions. Every moment, every hesitation, every maybe later, is a choice that shapes the person you become. That realization can feel heavy, because once you understand you are the author, you can no longer blame anyone else, the government, your parents, society, for how your life unfolds. Even refusing to choose is, in Sartre's view, still a choice. The weight of infinite possibility can crush those who crave certainty, yet it also liberates those brave enough to act. Think about it. How many times have you told yourself, I have no choice? In that moment, you weren't describing reality, you were escaping it. Freedom isn't comfortable, it's raw, infinite, and deeply personal. But only when you accept that everything depends on you can you truly live authentically. What choice are you pretending you don't have? Bad faith, Sartre, being and nothingness. Sartre later expanded this idea with one of his most haunting concepts, mauvaise foi, or bad faith. It's the art of lying to yourself about your own freedom. You pretend you're a fixed thing, a role, a job, a label, so you can escape responsibility for your choices. He gives a famous example of a waiter who acts overly waiter-like. His movements are mechanical, his smile rehearsed, his tone polite to perfection. Sartre says this man is playing the role of a waiter rather than being himself. He hides behind his uniform, using it as a mask to avoid confronting his deeper freedom, the freedom to choose another life entirely. We do this too. We say, "That's just who I am," or "I can't change." But these are defenses. Sartre believed such statements are acts of self-deception, ways of pretending we're objects rather than conscious agents. The truth is, we are never just something. We are always becoming. Modern life rewards this kind of bad faith. We hide behind titles, routines, and social roles. We curate an identity online and start living for that digital version of ourselves. But deep down, you know it's a mask. Authenticity begins the moment you drop the performance and face the discomfort of being the one in charge. Where are you pretending you have no choice to avoid discomfort? Determinism versus compatibilism. Ancient question, modern neuroscience. For centuries, philosophers have wrestled with a troubling question. If every event has a cause, and every cause has a cause before it, then aren't our actions determined long before we make them? If so, what does it even mean to have free will? Determinism says that, in principle, if someone knew every particle's position and velocity, they could predict the entire future, including every word you'll ever say. Modern neuroscience seems to flirt with this idea, too. Brain scans can sometimes detect a decision milliseconds before the person consciously chooses. Are we just spectators in our own heads? Compatibilists, however, offer a more hopeful answer. They argue that freedom doesn't mean uncaused action. It means acting according to your desires and reasoning, even if those desires have causes. In other words, you're free when you act as yourself, not when you act without cause. Think of it like this. When you decide to exercise because you want to feel strong, that's freedom. When you do it because someone forces you, that's not. Whether or not the desire itself was caused by your upbringing or biology doesn't matter as much as the fact that you endorse it. So perhaps freedom isn't cosmic randomness, it's inner alignment. We are determined beings who can still choose what kind of person we want to be within that web of causes. Does it matter if you're determined, if you feel free? The paradox of choice, Barry Schwartz, Contemporary Psychology. We live in an era Sartre couldn't have imagined, one where freedom has been inflated into endless possibility. Want a new job? You can choose from thousands. Want to watch something? You scroll through endless streaming platforms. Want a date? Swipe through hundreds of profiles. And yet, despite all these options, we're not happier. We're more anxious, more dissatisfied, more paralyzed. Barry Schwartz called this the paradox of choice. He discovered that when people have too many options, their satisfaction drops. Why? Because every decision becomes a minefield of what-ifs. Every yes is haunted by the ghost of 1,000 maybes. We start fearing the wrong choice more than desiring the right one. True freedom, Schwartz argues, requires boundaries. Without limits, meaning dissolves. Imagine if you could have every life, every career, every relationship, every version of yourself. That might sound liberating, but it would be unbearable. Because what gives life shape is not infinite choice, it's commitment. In fact, peace often arrives not when we expand our options, but when we close some doors intentionally. We choose, we accept, and we move forward. The world says freedom is saying yes to everything. But maybe real freedom is the courage to say no, to others, to distractions, even to parts of your old self. Where in your life would less choice bring more peace? Autonomy as self-legislation, Immanuel Kant, Enlightenment. Immanuel Kant took the idea of freedom in an entirely different direction. For him, freedom wasn't doing whatever you wanted. It was obeying yourself. That sounds strange until you realize what he meant. Most people, Kant said, live as slaves to desire. They're pulled by impulses, habits, and emotions like leaves in the wind. They think they're free because no one is forcing them. But in truth, They're prisoners of whatever they happen to want in the moment. Real freedom, Kant argued, means acting according to reason, following a law that you give yourself through moral reflection. He called this autonomy, from the Greek autos, self, and nomos, law. When you resist a temptation because you've decided it conflicts with your values, that's not restriction, it's liberation. You're no longer a puppet of desire, you're a master of self. This concept is quietly revolutionary. In a culture obsessed with instant gratification, Kant reminds us that freedom and discipline are not opposites, they are allies. When you act from reason will, not impulse, you align your actions with something higher than mood or pressure. Think about the last time you resisted something tempting, not because someone told you to, but because you decided it wasn't aligned with who you want to be. That was freedom. That was autonomy. When you resist temptation, which you is winning? Positive versus negative liberty. Isaiah Berlin, 20th century. Isaiah Berlin introduced one of the most influential distinctions in modern political thought, the difference between negative and positive liberty. Negative liberty is the freedom from interference, the absence of external constraints or coercion. It's the kind of freedom that says, no one is stopping you. Positive liberty, on the other hand, is the freedom to, the ability to actually do or become what you desire. It's not just being unchained. It's having the strength, knowledge, and opportunity to move forward. Berlin warned that both forms of freedom can become distorted. Negative liberty can lead to isolation, a society of individuals shouting, "Don't tell me what to do," while still trapped by poverty, ignorance, or addiction. Positive liberty, when pushed too far, can justify control, governments claiming to know what's best for people for their own good. The challenge, he said, is balance, ensuring freedom from interference without losing the support systems that make real freedom possible. In the modern world, we often think of freedom as the right to choose. But what good is choice without capability? You might be free to travel anywhere, but if you lack money, time, or health, that freedom is only theoretical. Likewise, you might be free to speak your truth, but if your environment punishes dissent, are you truly free? Freedom, then, is not just the removal of chains, it's the cultivation of wings. It's about creating the inner and outer conditions that allow a person to flourish. Political debates still echo Berlin's insight. Do we protect people from interference, or do we empower them to act? Perhaps the answer isn't either/or, it's both. Are you free from interference, but incapable of what you want to do? Akrasia, weakness of will. Aristotle, Ancient Ethics. Aristotle puzzled over a timeless question. Why do people act against their own better judgment? He called it akrasia, the weakness of will. It's that strange contradiction where you know what's right, yet still do what's wrong. You know you should study, but you scroll. You know you should save money, but you spend. You know what matters, but you act as if you don't. For Aristotle, akrasia occurs when reason loses its command over desire. You still know the good, but in the heat of the moment, your emotions or impulses override it. It's not ignorance, it's fragmentation. The rational part of you and the impulsive part of you become two voices fighting for control, and too often, the louder one wins. He believed moral strength isn't about suppressing desire, but harmonizing it with reason, training the soul so that your wants and your wisdom point in the same direction. Virtue, in Aristotle's eyes, wasn't cold discipline. It was the joyful habit of doing what's right naturally. Modern psychology gives us new names for akrasia: procrastination, addiction, self-sabotage. We build apps to fight distraction, routines to fight laziness. Yet the real battle remains internal. Knowing isn't enough. Wanting and doing must align. Every moment of weakness is an invitation to practice that alignment again. What do you know you should do that you're not doing? The burden of responsibility. Dostoevsky saw freedom not as a gift, but as a heavy, almost unbearable responsibility. In The Brothers Karamazov, he presents a haunting idea. If God is dead, everything is permitted. When divine authority fades, humans inherit the terrifying power of choice, without any guaranteed compass to guide them. This isn't a celebration of chaos. It's an existential warning. Without an external moral order, every person must become their own lawgiver, choosing what's right without certainty. That kind of freedom can drive people to despair. It's easier, Dostoevsky suggests, to surrender our freedom to authority, ideology, or routine than to bear the anxiety of moral independence. He saw modernity as both liberating and lonely. The old structures, church, tradition, moral absolutes, once gave life meaning. But once they crumble, we stand naked before infinity. What, then, keeps a person good when no one is watching? Dostoevsky's answer wasn't rules, it was conscience. The moral law written in the human heart, discovered through suffering and empathy. Freedom without conscience becomes cruelty. But freedom with conscience becomes divine. It's the difference between destruction and creation. In a world where everything seems relative, we each carry the sacred duty to decide what matters, and to live by it even when unseen. If no one is watching, what keeps you good? The sunk cost fallacy. Imagine you've spent years in a job you hate, a relationship that's drained you, or a project that no longer excites you. Deep down, you know it's time to let go, but a thought stops you. I've already invested too much to quit now. That's the sunk cost fallacy, the human tendency to continue something simply because we've already paid for it, whether in time, effort, or emotion. Economists describe it as irrational because the past is gone. What matters is whether continuing serves you now. Yet philosophy shows us the deeper meaning behind this behavior. We cling not just to investments, but to identities. Quitting feels like losing part of who we were, the person who believed it was worth it. We say, I can't give up now, as if stopping would erase the meaning of everything before. But it doesn't. Every past version of you acted with the knowledge and courage they had at the time. The only mistake is letting their decisions chain the present you. Letting go isn't failure, it's evolution. The future demands that we keep shedding skins. You don't know the past or future. Whether it's money, love, or pride, ask yourself, are you continuing because it still matters, or because you've already started? Every moment offers a new calculation, not what you've lost, but what's still worth gaining. What are you continuing only because you've already started? Wu Wei, effortless action. In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu spoke of a mysterious state called Wu Wei, literally non-action, but not in the sense of doing nothing. It means effortless action, acting in perfect harmony with the natural flow of things. Imagine a dancer so in tune with the music that every movement feels spontaneous. That's Wu Wei. The Taoists saw that most human suffering comes from forcing, trying to control what cannot be controlled, or rushing what needs time. The sage, they said, moves like water, yielding yet unstoppable, soft yet powerful. When you stop pushing, the current carries you. When you stop grasping, you start growing. Modern psychology has rediscovered this idea through flow states. Athletes, artists, musicians, they all describe moments when self-consciousness disappears and performance becomes effortless. Paradoxically, mastery feels easy not because it lacks effort, but because effort and awareness fuse into one. Wu Wei doesn't mean apathy, it means alignment. When you live according to your nature, your actions become graceful. When you fight against it, even small things feel like war. The Tao reminds us, the world is not conquered by force, but by harmony. So ask yourself, where are you trying too hard? Where are you pushing water uphill? Sometimes, the answer isn't to fight harder, but to stop fighting at all, to trust the current you're already in. Where in your life are you pushing water uphill? Hedonia versus Eudaimonia. What does it mean to live a good life? For Aristotle, the answer wasn't about chasing pleasure. It was about becoming excellent at being human. He drew a distinction between hedonia, the pursuit of pleasure, and eudaimonia, often translated as flourishing. Pleasure is temporary, like the sweetness of honey on the tongue. Eudaimonia, on the other hand, is deeper, a state of fulfillment that comes from living with purpose, virtue, and reason. Aristotle believed that happiness is not something we can directly aim for. It's the byproduct of living well, of cultivating virtues like courage, honesty, and wisdom. You don't become happy by pursuing happiness. You become happy by living a life worth living. This idea resonates with modern psychology, particularly the distinction between hedonic happiness, short-term pleasure, and eudaimonic happiness, meaning and self-actualization. Today, people spend their lives chasing dopamine, likes, money, validation, mistaking momentary pleasure for true fulfillment. Yet research shows that meaning-driven lives, not pleasure-driven ones, lead to deeper satisfaction. The paradox of happiness is that the more you chase it, the more it slips away. The more you act with integrity and purpose, the more it quietly finds you. Think back to a time you weren't necessarily happy, yet you felt deeply alive. Perhaps you were working hard toward a goal, caring for someone you love, or enduring difficulty for something meaningful. That's eudaimonia, the kind of happiness that lasts. The Four Noble Truths. More than 2,500 years ago, the Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree and uncovered a profound truth about human existence. Life involves suffering. But he didn't stop there. He mapped out why we suffer and how we can end it. The Four Noble Truths became the foundation of Buddhist philosophy. First, life is suffering dukkha. We grow old. We lose people. We face uncertainty. Second, suffering comes from craving, our constant desire for more success, more control, more comfort. Third, there is a way to end suffering, by letting go of that craving. And fourth, the path to that liberation is through right understanding, right action, and mindfulness, the Noble Eightfold Path. The Buddha's insight was radical. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. We suffer not because life hurts, but because we resist what is. Modern therapy echoes this wisdom. Acceptance and commitment therapy teaches that peace comes not from avoiding pain, but from accepting it and still choosing to live meaningfully. What are you craving right now that's causing you to suffer? Maybe it's approval, maybe it's security, maybe it's the fantasy of how life should be. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means seeing clearly what is and choosing freedom over attachment. The hedonic treadmill. In 1971, psychologists Philip Brickman and Donald Campbell discovered something unsettling. No matter what happens to us, whether we win the lottery or suffer tragedy, we tend to return to a baseline level of happiness. This is the hedonic treadmill. You run and run, chasing satisfaction, but you never really get anywhere. We adapt quickly to both fortune and misfortune. The new car smell fades. The promotion becomes normal. The excitement of a new relationship stabilizes into routine. Our brains are wired to adapt because that's how we survive, but it also means lasting happiness doesn't come from external gains. This explains why so many people feel empty despite having everything. The solution, research suggests, lies in gratitude and presence. When you stop sprinting after the next thing and start appreciating what you already have, your baseline happiness begins to rise. Ask yourself, what did you once believe would make you happy, but didn't? The answer often reveals how illusionary our desires are. True contentment isn't found in having more. It's found in wanting less. Negative visualization. The Stoics had a counterintuitive practice called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, would often imagine losing everything he loved, his health, his power, even his life. It wasn't morbid, it was liberating. By vividly imagining loss, Stoics cultivated deep gratitude for the present. If you imagine losing your sight, suddenly you see the world more vividly. If you imagine losing a loved one, every moment with them becomes sacred. This is negative visualization, the art of appreciating what you have by contemplating its absence. Modern psychology calls this defensive pessimism. Preparing the mind for hardship reduces shock and anxiety. It's also an antidote to entitlement. We live in a culture that tells us to expect comfort, to fear pain. The Stoics flipped that. Expect change, expect loss, and you'll be ready for life when it happens. Who in your life are you taking for granted? Imagine, just for a moment, if they weren't there tomorrow. Now look at them again, not with attachment, but with appreciation. The dichotomy of control. Epictetus, a former slave-turned-philosopher, offered one of the simplest yet most transformative principles for peace. Some things are up to us, and some things are not. Our judgments, desires, and actions are within our control. Other people's opinions, outcomes, and the past are not. Most human suffering comes from confusing the two, from trying to control what we can't and neglecting what we can. When we obsess over outcomes, whether we'll be liked, whether we'll succeed, whether life will go our way, we give away our power. But when we focus on our attitude, our effort, and our integrity, we reclaim it. This principle echoes through modern wisdom. From the Serenity Prayer, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, to cognitive behavioral therapy, which teaches that our thoughts shape our emotions. Ask yourself, what are you worrying about right now that you cannot control? Let it go. Your peace begins where your control ends. Amor Fati, Nietzsche, life-affirming philosophy. Friedrich Nietzsche proposed a daring idea, amor fati, meaning love of fate. Not just accepting life's events, but embracing them fully, as if you had chosen them yourself. Imagine saying yes not only to your triumphs, but also to your failures, heartbreaks, and struggles. Nietzsche believed that true strength comes from affirming life in all its chaos and pain. Every hardship, he said, is part of the great dance of becoming. If you erased your suffering, you would erase the very process that made you who you are. Modern psychology calls this post-traumatic growth, the idea that suffering can deepen meaning and build resilience. When you stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, how can this shape me? Life's narrative transforms from tragedy to triumph. What painful experience made you who you are today? If you can find gratitude even for that, you've understood Amor Fati. The Experience Machine, Robert Nozick, thought experiment. In 1974, philosopher Robert Nozick posed a question that still haunts us today. If you could plug into a machine that would give you endless pleasure, happiness, and success, all simulated perfectly, would you do it? Most people say no. Why? Because we don't just want to feel happy, we want to be real. We crave authenticity, connection, growth. If happiness were all that mattered, the machine would be paradise. But deep down, we know something would be missing, truth. Nozick's Experience Machine exposes a crucial insight. Meaning, not pleasure, defines a good life. Modern parallels surround us: virtual reality, social media, drugs, even constant entertainment. We already have miniature experience machines, and yet people feel more empty than ever. The more we escape reality, the less we truly live. The good life isn't one of endless pleasure, but of real experience, joy and sorrow, love and loss, truth and illusion. Ask yourself, what do you value more than feeling good? Whatever that is, truth, growth, love, follow it. Because real happiness isn't something we plug into. It's something we wake up to. Dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, Buddhism. In Buddhism, there's a word that's often mistranslated as suffering, but it's far deeper and subtler, dukkha. It refers to the unsatisfactoriness woven into existence itself, the faint, persistent itch that nothing is ever quite enough. Even our pleasures carry a hidden discomfort. The meal that delights us ends too soon. The love that fills us also makes us fear loss. The success we dream of turns hollow once achieved. Dukkha is not just pain. It's the restlessness of wanting life to be other than it is. The Buddha taught that dukkha arises from tanha, craving, the constant grasping at experiences, possessions, and identities. Our minds are like hamsters on a wheel, always chasing the next hit of satisfaction, the next purchase, the next compliment, the next goal. But the moment we get it, we start craving again. Look around. The modern world is built on dukkha. Consumerism thrives on dissatisfaction, on the quiet whisper that says, you are not enough, but maybe this product will fix you. Social media amplifies it. We scroll endlessly, comparing our behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel, always seeking, never resting. The Buddhist path isn't about escaping life's pleasures, but about seeing their impermanence clearly. When you realize that even joy fades, you stop clinging. You begin to experience life not as a hunt for satisfaction, but as a dance of arising and passing moments. Think about the last time you got exactly what you wanted. How long before you wanted something else? That gap between desire and disappointment, that's dukkha. Seeing it clearly is the first step to freedom. The golden mean, Aristotle, virtue ethics. Aristotle believed that virtue, the essence of good character, lies in the middle path between two extremes. He called this the golden mean. For him, moral excellence wasn't about rigid rules or blind moderation, but balance. Take courage. Too little of it is cowardice. Too much becomes recklessness. Generosity. Too little is stinginess. Too much is wastefulness. Even qualities we admire can become vices when taken to excess. The key, Aristotle said, is harmony, finding the right amount of emotion and action for each situation. The golden mean applies not only to morality, but to modern life. In a culture that glorifies extremes, workaholism, hustle, consumption, it's revolutionary to live in balance. True strength is not burning out for success, but knowing when to rest. True passion is not obsession, but sustainable dedication. This principle also mirrors psychological well-being. Research shows that mental health thrives on flexibility, not rigidity. The person who can adjust, who knows when to push and when to pause, lives closer to Eudaimonia, the flourishing life. Look at your own habits. Where are you living in extremes? Maybe you work too much and neglect joy. Maybe you play too much and neglect growth. The golden mean invites you to recalibrate, to find the center point where virtue lives quietly, between too little and too much. Sympathetic joy, mudita, Buddhism. There's a quiet joy that doesn't depend on your own success. It blooms when you witness someone else's. The Buddhists call it mudita, or sympathetic joy, the ability to feel genuine happiness for others' happiness. In a world built on competition, this is a rare and radical virtue. Social media has trained us to compare, to measure our worth against someone else's highlight reel. When a friend achieves something, instead of celebrating, we often feel a sting of envy, as if their light dims ours. But mudita flips this script. It reminds us that happiness is not a limited resource. Someone else's win doesn't mean your loss. Cultivating mudita expands the heart. It dissolves jealousy and loneliness. When you rejoice in others' joy, your capacity for joy multiplies. This is psychological abundance. The recognition that the more you celebrate others, the richer your own emotional life becomes. Modern psychology backs this up. Studies on gratitude and positive emotion show that celebrating others strengthens relationships and increases personal well-being. The happiest people are not those constantly chasing their own joy, but those who amplify joy wherever they find it. Whose success makes you feel diminished instead of delighted? That discomfort is your signal, a chance to practice mudita. Imagine your friend's happiness as a candle flame. Lighting your own from it doesn't make theirs burn dimmer, it makes the room brighter. The paradox of hedonism, Henry Sidgwick, 19th century. Henry Sidgwick, a 19th century philosopher, identified a fascinating paradox. The more you chase pleasure directly, the less you actually experience it. This is the paradox of hedonism. Think of trying to fall asleep. The harder you try, the more awake you become. Happiness works the same way. It resists pursuit. When you constantly check if you're happy, you pull yourself out of the very state you're trying to achieve. Sidgwick observed that true happiness arises indirectly, as a byproduct of meaningful action. When you're deeply engaged in something, learning, creating, helping others, you forget yourself. Time disappears. You're not trying to be happy. You simply are. Modern psychology calls this flow. It's the state of complete absorption where joy and performance peak. Ironically, when you stop chasing happiness and start chasing excellence, connection, or purpose, happiness finds you anyway. This explains why many self-care trends backfire. When self-care becomes a ritual of constant self-focus. Am I relaxed enough, centered enough, happy enough? It often amplifies discontent. The trick is to lose yourself in something bigger. What do you do that makes you forget to check if you're happy? That's your doorway to real joy. Voluntary simplicity, Epicurus, ancient Greece, modern minimalism. Epicurus is often misunderstood as a philosopher of indulgence, but his teachings were about the opposite, simplicity. Wealth, he said, is not having much, but needing little. Voluntary simplicity is the art of reducing desires, not out of deprivation, but out of freedom. The more you need, the more you suffer. Every extra desire is a potential chain. Epicurus believed the happiest life was one of modest pleasures, deep friendships, and freedom from unnecessary craving. In our age of overconsumption, this message feels revolutionary. Minimalism, sustainability, and the FIRE, financial independence, retire early, movement all echo this ancient truth, that joy increases when clutter decreases, both external and mental. Epicurus didn't reject pleasure, he refined it. He said the finest meal is one eaten in gratitude, the best wealth is peace of mind. When you need less, you begin to see how much you already have. What do you own that owns you? Sometimes it's not objects, it's obligations, comparisons, or identities. Simplicity isn't about emptiness. It's about space, for peace, for meaning, for being. The set point theory of happiness, positive psychology. Modern psychology offers a sobering insight. About 50% of our happiness is determined by genetics, 10% by circumstances, and the remaining 40% by intentional activity. This is the set point theory of happiness. That means even when our external conditions change, money, location, relationships, our happiness tends to drift back to a stable baseline. Yet within that 40%, we have enormous freedom. Gratitude, kindness, mindfulness, and purpose-driven living can significantly elevate our baseline over time. This theory reframes happiness from something to achieve into something to cultivate. It reminds us that lasting well-being is less about changing the world outside and more about mastering the world within. If your circumstances changed nothing, if wealth, fame, or success couldn't touch your inner state, how else could you be happier? The answer lies in what you do daily, not what you own. Apeiron, the boundless. Anaximander, pre-Socratic philosophy. Long before Plato or Aristotle, the Greek philosopher Anaximander pondered the origin of everything. He called it the apeiron, the boundless, the infinite. He believed that all things arise from this limitless source and eventually return to it. The apeiron is the cosmic reminder that everything we see, the stars, the oceans, our own lives, is part of something immeasurable and eternal. From this perspective, our worries shrink. Our dramas, our fears, even our ambitions, they're ripples on an infinite sea. Modern cosmology echoes this all. We now know we inhabit one small planet orbiting one star in a galaxy of hundreds of billions, in a universe with potentially infinite others. Seeing life through the lens of the boundless brings humility and peace. How do your worries look from the scale of the cosmos? When you zoom out far enough, even the heaviest burdens become lighter. Everything changes, but the infinite remains. Integration versus transcendence. Ken Wilber, Integral Theory. Ken Wilber, a modern philosopher of consciousness, teaches that true spiritual growth doesn't mean escaping your past. It means integrating it. His framework, Integral Theory, says development happens through inclusion, not rejection. Too often, people try to transcend their pain, their ego, their shadow. They suppress anger, deny desire, and call it enlightenment. But repression isn't transcendence, it's avoidance. Real evolution means embracing all parts of yourself, even the dark ones, and transforming them through awareness. This is what psychologists call shadow integration. Every quality you deny, jealousy, fear, pride, continues to control you from the dark. By owning it, you reclaim your wholeness. Modern spirituality often gets lost in toxic positivity, pretending everything is love and light. Wilber reminds us, the higher path includes the lower. You don't rise by rejecting who you were. You rise by holding every version of yourself in compassion. What part of yourself are you trying to transcend that actually needs integration? Sometimes, The door to growth isn't up, it's inward. The categorical imperative, Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant believed that true morality doesn't come from feelings or consequences, it comes from reason. He proposed what he called the categorical imperative, a principle that tells us to act only according to maxims we could will to become universal laws. In simpler words, before doing anything, ask yourself, what if everyone in the world did the same thing I'm about to do? If the world would fall apart or the action would contradict itself when universalized, then it's immoral. For Kant, morality wasn't about what feels right or what leads to happiness. It was about duty, logic, and consistency. A lie, for example, isn't wrong because it hurts someone's feelings. It's wrong because if everyone lied, truth itself would collapse and communication would lose meaning. Kant's ethics inspired the foundation of universal human rights and the logic of moral duty. It tells us that each human being must be treated as an end in themselves, never as a mere means to an end. Modern debates about AI ethics, justice systems, and even environmental responsibility still echo Kant's question, what if everyone did what you're about to do? Utilitarianism, Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill turned morality on its head. They asked not about duty or intention, but about results. Their theory, utilitarianism, claims that the right action is the one that maximizes happiness for the greatest number of people. Bentham believed pleasure and pain are the only real guides in human life. So morality should aim to produce the most pleasure and the least pain. Mill refined this by arguing that not all pleasures are equal. Reading poetry or developing your mind is more valuable than simple physical satisfaction. This approach revolutionized law, politics, and economics. Governments use utilitarian logic when crafting policies, balancing benefits and harms to maximize social welfare. From deciding public health measures to justifying wars, utilitarian thinking still dominates decision-making today. But it comes with hard questions. Would you sacrifice one life to save 5? Should personal happiness ever outweigh the happiness of others? Utilitarianism forces us to face the uncomfortable reality that morality sometimes demands painful trade-offs, and that what feels right isn't always what is right. Virtue ethics, Aristotle and Confucius. Before rules and consequences, Aristotle asked a different question. What kind of person should I become? Virtue ethics focuses on character rather than commands. It teaches that morality isn't about following laws or calculating happiness. It's about developing virtues like courage, honesty, patience, and wisdom until they become second nature. For Aristotle, a good life meant achieving eudaimonia, a flourishing, fulfilling existence guided by reason. And the path to it was through balance. Courage lies between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity lies between greed and wastefulness. Virtue, then, is a matter of habit and moderation. Confucius echoed similar ideas in China, arguing that moral harmony comes from self-cultivation, respect for others, and fulfilling one's roles with sincerity. Both thinkers believed you become moral through practice, reflection, and imitation of moral exemplars. In our age of social media scandals and quick judgments, virtue ethics reminds us that integrity can't be faked. It's not about what you do once. It's about who you are when no one's keeping score. So instead of asking, what's the rule? Maybe the real question is, who do you want to be? The veil of ignorance, John Rawls. Imagine designing a society, but you have no idea who you'll be in it. You could be rich or poor, healthy or sick, powerful or powerless. That's the thought experiment philosopher John Rawls called the veil of ignorance. Behind this veil, you'd create laws and institutions that are fair to everyone, because you wouldn't risk making rules that favor the privileged if you might end up disadvantaged. Rawls argued that this is how true justice works, not as charity or pity, but as fairness born from rational self-interest under uncertainty. This principle underlies many modern ideas about social justice, welfare, and equality. When policymakers debate healthcare, education, or taxation, the question often mirrors Rawls' veil. Would this still seem fair if I were born at the bottom? In an age where privilege and inequality shape opportunity, Rawls' thought experiment forces humility. It asks each of us to step out of our own perspective and consider, what rules would you create if you didn't know your advantages? The Ethics of Care, Carol Gilligan. For centuries, moral philosophy was dominated by male voices emphasizing justice, rules, and reason. Carol Gilligan challenged that tradition with the Ethics of Care. She argued that morality isn't just about impartial principles. It's about relationships, empathy, and responsibility toward those who depend on us. Gilligan observed that traditional ethics often ignored the moral wisdom found in nurturing, caregiving, and emotional understanding, qualities traditionally associated with women. The Ethics of Care emphasizes connection over calculation, compassion over cold rationality. This approach has reshaped how we think about healthcare, family obligations, and even leadership. A nurse caring for a dying patient, or a parent sacrificing sleep for a child, might not be acting from abstract duty, but from love and moral attentiveness. In a world obsessed with competition and independence, care ethics reminds us that morality is also about interdependence. It asks not just what is right, but who needs me right now, and how does that shape what's right? Moral luck, Bernard Williams and Thomas Nagel. Imagine two drunk drivers leaving a party. Both make the same reckless choice, but only one hits a pedestrian. Society condemns one as a murderer and the other as merely foolish. That's the puzzle of moral luck. Philosophers Bernard Williams and Thomas Nagel pointed out that we often judge people morally for things beyond their control. Outcomes, often shaped by chance, affect how we perceive virtue, guilt, and blame. The driver who didn't hit anyone was lucky, not more moral. This idea shakes our confidence in moral judgment. If luck influences whether we're good or bad in others' eyes, how fair are our moral systems? The concept of moral luck extends beyond accidents. It touches privilege, upbringing, and opportunity. Some people are born into safety nets, others into chaos. Yet we hold both equally accountable. In modern discussions about forgiveness, inequality, and systemic injustice, moral luck forces compassion. It reminds us that humility should accompany judgment, because much of who we are and what we avoid might come down to chance. So before condemning others too harshly, ask yourself, how much of your virtue is luck? The Ring of Gyges, Plato. In the Republic, Plato tells the story of Gyges, a shepherd who finds a ring that makes him invisible. With this power, he seduces the queen, murders the king, and takes the throne, without anyone ever knowing. Plato poses a haunting question. Would you still be good if you could never be caught? The story reveals a tension between morality and self-interest. Many people behave morally not because they love virtue, but because they fear punishment or judgment. The Ring of Gyges strips away those fears. It asks whether morality has any real hold when the eyes of others are gone. In today's world, that ring looks like internet anonymity, where people say and do things online they never would in person. It's in corporate secrecy, political deception, and the private corners of every digital life. Plato's tale still whispers across millennia. Integrity isn't proven when others are watching. It's proven when no one is. So the question remains, who are you when no one is watching? The doctrine of double effect, Thomas Aquinas. In the 13th century, Thomas Aquinas faced one of morality's hardest questions. Can an action that causes harm ever be morally acceptable if the harm wasn't the goal, but a side effect? From this came the doctrine of double effect. It states that sometimes it's permissible to cause harm as a side effect of doing good, but never as a means to achieve that good. To Aquinas, intention is everything. If a doctor gives a dying patient high doses of morphine to relieve unbearable pain, knowing it might also hasten death, the death is a foreseen but unintended side effect. That's morally different from deliberately giving a lethal injection to kill the patient, even if the outcome, death, is the same. The first act is mercy, the second murder. This principle is crucial in medical ethics, especially in end-of-life care and abortion debates. It also shapes war ethics. Bombing a military base that unintentionally kills civilians is tragic, but may be justified. Directly targeting civilians is not. The distinction between collateral damage and intentional killing lies in what you aim for. The doctrine forces us to wrestle with the limits of moral purity in a messy world. Sometimes, doing good means accepting that harm will follow, not because we want it, but because reality offers no perfect choice. Yet the hardest question remains. Where do you draw the line between accepting and intending harm? Ren, humaneness/benevolence. Confucius. In ancient China, Confucius didn't preach commandments or divine laws. He taught Ren, often translated as humaneness or benevolence. It was the highest virtue, the moral heartbeat of Confucian thought. Ren means treating others with empathy, kindness, and respect, not out of obligation, but because that's what makes us truly human. For Confucius, moral goodness isn't built in isolation. It's cultivated through relationships. A ruler who governs with Ren wins loyalty without fear. A child who acts with Ren honors their parents, and in doing so, strengthens the moral fabric of society. Every interaction, no matter how small, becomes a chance to practice compassion and harmony. Ren goes hand in hand with Li, ritual propriety. It's not just about emotion, but about conduct, how you speak, behave, and respect social roles. Together, Ren and Li shape character not through force, but through consistent moral cultivation. In a modern world dominated by individualism, Ren offers an Eastern counterpoint. It teaches that your worth isn't measured by independence, but by how your actions ripple through your community. Every smile, every word of patience, every act of understanding strengthens the invisible thread that binds us. So ask yourself, how do your actions honor or dishonor your relationships? The trolley problem, Philippa Foot and Judith Jarvis Thompson. A runaway trolley is speeding down a track toward 5 people. You stand beside a lever that could divert it onto another track, where it would kill just 1 person. Do you pull the lever? This haunting question, first posed by Philippa Foot and expanded by Judith Jarvis Thompson, became one of modern philosophy's most famous moral puzzles, the trolley problem. It tests our intuitions about action versus inaction, and about the difference between killing and letting die. Most people say they'd pull the lever. It feels like saving 5 is better than saving 1. But now imagine pushing a man onto the tracks to stop the trolley. The outcome is the same. 1 dies, 5 live, but it feels very different. Why? Because in one case, harm is a side effect. In the other, harm is used as a means. This subtle difference echoes Aquinas' doctrine of double effect, showing how intention separates moral acceptability from moral horror. Today, this dilemma isn't hypothetical. It's coded into algorithms for self-driving cars. Should a car swerve to save its passengers or pedestrians? In AI ethics, these life-and-death decisions must be programmed by humans. The trolley problem doesn't give easy answers. It mirrors the tension between logic and emotion, between numbers and morality. It leaves us with a chilling question. When is it okay to sacrifice one for many? Effective altruism, Peter Singer. If you could save a child drowning in a shallow pond, would you? Most people say yes, even if it ruins their shoes. But philosopher Peter Singer asks, if you can save a life by donating to an effective charity instead, why don't you? That's the foundation of effective altruism, the idea that we should use reason and evidence to do the most good possible. Not all charitable acts are equal. Some save lives for a few dollars, others barely make a dent. For example, a $5,000 donation can provide thousands of mosquito nets that prevent malaria, saving more lives than the same money spent on building a new museum wing. Effective altruism isn't just about donations, it's a lifestyle. Some people choose careers not for money or passion, but for impact, to maximize good through research, advocacy, or high-earning jobs that allow them to donate more. It's also expanded into long-termism, the belief that helping future generations, preventing global catastrophes, or improving AI safety might be the most moral cause of all. But the movement raises uncomfortable questions. Should emotion play a role in generosity? Is it wrong to help a neighbor instead of a stranger overseas if the latter statistically benefits more? Effective altruism asks us to align our moral compass not with our feelings, but with reason. And it whispers, are you choosing to help based on emotion or effectiveness? Moral relativism versus moral universalism, the ancient debate. Are moral truths absolute, or do they depend on culture and context? This question has haunted philosophy since the ancient Greeks. Moral relativism argues that right and wrong are shaped by society. What's moral in one culture may be immoral in another. Moral universalism insists that some truths hold everywhere, for everyone. Relativists point to diversity. Some cultures practice arranged marriage, others see it as oppression. Some see ancestor worship as sacred, others as idolatry. There's no global moral yardstick, they say, only perspectives. But universalists warn that pure relativism can excuse atrocities. If morality is only cultural, then slavery, genocide, or oppression could be justified wherever they're accepted. Modern society lives in this tension. Globalization and multiculturalism demand respect for difference, while human rights movements insist on universal moral standards. When we condemn child labor or defend women's rights, we act as universalists. When we protect cultural traditions or autonomy, we lean toward relativism. This debate isn't theoretical. It defines diplomacy, law, and even internet discourse. Every argument about freedom of speech, religion, or identity rests on this ancient divide. So the question still stands. Is anything wrong everywhere, always for everyone? The is-ought problem, David Hume. In the 18th century, David Hume made a startling observation. You can't logically derive an ought from an is. In other words, no matter how many facts you gather about the world, they can't by themselves tell you what you should do. Science can explain what is, but morality concerns what ought to be. For example, nature may show that animals eat each other, but that doesn't mean we should accept cruelty. Describing the world doesn't justify its values. This gap, known as Hume's guillotine, sliced cleanly between facts and ethics. Many thinkers have tried to bridge it, and failed. The mistake of assuming what is natural must be good is called the naturalistic fallacy. Today, Hume's insight shapes debates about everything from bioengineering to AI. Scientists can clone humans or design new species. But should they? Economists can measure growth. But should endless growth be our goal? Data alone can't decide value. The is-ought problem reminds us that progress without morality is directionless. Knowledge tells us what we can do. Wisdom asks what we should do. And so, the next time someone says, that's just how it is, remember to ask, just because something is natural, does that make it good? Ahimsa, non-harm, Jainism, Hinduism, Buddhism. Across ancient India, a single word captured the essence of compassion, ahimsa. It means nonviolence, not only in action, but in thought and speech. It's the moral foundation of Jainism, a central virtue in Hinduism, and a guiding principle in Buddhism. Ahimsa isn't passive. It's an active commitment to reducing suffering wherever possible. Jains take this to extraordinary lengths, sweeping paths to avoid stepping on insects, wearing masks to prevent harming microscopic life. It's a radical empathy that extends to all beings. For Hindus and Buddhists, ahimsa also means controlling anger, greed, and ego. Violence isn't just physical, it begins in the mind. The goal isn't to never fight, but to never hate. In modern times, Mahatma Gandhi transformed ahimsa into a global political force. His philosophy of nonviolent resistance inspired civil rights movements across the world, from Martin Luther King Jr. to Nelson Mandela. Today, ahimsa echoes in veganism, pacifism, and environmental ethics. Every choice we make, what we eat, buy, or tolerate, affects other living beings. It invites a moral expansion of our empathy. How far does your circle of moral consideration extend? The repugnant conclusion, Derek Parfit. Imagine two worlds. In the first, 1 billion people live rich, fulfilling lives filled with art, love, and meaning. In the second, 1 trillion people exist, but their lives are barely worth living. They're not miserable, just empty. Which world is better? This is the repugnant conclusion, a paradox introduced by philosopher Derek Parfit in his study of population ethics. According to strict utilitarian logic, where total happiness matters more than individual quality, the second world is better because more total happiness exists, even if it's spread thin. But intuitively, that feels wrong, repugnant, even. Parfit's challenge exposes the limits of moral mathematics. Can you really sum up human lives like numbers in an equation? If happiness is diluted across vast populations, is that truly a better world? This debate shapes real-world issues like environmental sustainability, reproductive ethics, and the rights of future generations. Should we aim for a bigger population with lower quality of life, or fewer people living better lives? And what do we owe to those yet unborn? The repugnant conclusion doesn't have an easy answer. It reveals the tension between quantity and quality, expansion and contentment. It forces us to question the very meaning of a good life. And in the end, it asks, does mere existence have value, regardless of quality? The Will to Meaning, Viktor Frankl. In the darkness of a Nazi concentration camp, Viktor Frankl discovered something extraordinary. Even when stripped of everything, freedom, family, dignity, humans still have one freedom left, to choose their attitude towards suffering. Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, built his entire philosophy on that realization. He called it logotherapy, the therapy of meaning. Unlike Freud, who said we seek pleasure, or Nietzsche, who said we seek power, Frankl believed our deepest drive is the will to meaning. He saw that prisoners who found meaning, even in unbearable suffering, were more likely to survive. For one man, it was the hope of seeing his wife again. For another, the duty to finish a scientific manuscript. Meaning didn't erase pain, but it gave it purpose. Frankl wrote, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." His insight became a cornerstone of modern psychology, influencing everything from trauma recovery to motivational therapy. Today, in a world obsessed with happiness, Frankl's lesson is more relevant than ever. Meaning isn't found in comfort, it's forged in challenge. When you turn pain into purpose, you transform suffering into strength. So ask yourself, what would make your suffering worthwhile? The Absurd Hero, Camus, and Existentialism. If absurdism is the diagnosis, the absurd hero is the cure. Camus describes this figure as someone who lives fully aware of life's meaninglessness and chooses to live passionately anyway. The absurd hero refuses illusion. They don't seek comfort in religion, ideology, or fate. Instead, they embrace freedom, the freedom that comes from realizing nothing ultimately matters. Because if life has no predetermined meaning, then you are free to invent your own. Camus calls this rebellion, the act of saying yes to life even when life offers no justification. The absurd hero doesn't wait for purpose to appear. They live as if living itself were enough. In modern terms, this is optimistic nihilism, accepting that the universe is empty, but filling that emptiness with your own light. It's not about despair, but intensity. Travel, create, love, fail, rebuild, because you can. We see this spirit in artists, adventurers, and anyone who dares to live authentically in a meaningless world. Their joy comes not from certainty, but from courage. So if nothing matters, doesn't that mean you're free to choose what matters? Existential authenticity, Martin Heidegger. Martin Heidegger believed most people never truly live. We drift through life absorbed in what he called das Man, the they, the crowd, society's expectations. We do what one does, get a job, buy a house, post a photo, repeat. We live by default, not by decision. Heidegger called this inauthentic existence, a life dictated by others. Authenticity begins when we confront our own mortality. When we realize our time is finite, we awaken from the trance of conformity. The thought of death, instead of depressing us, clarifies what truly matters. To live authentically means choosing your own possibilities, not the ones handed to you. It's not rebellion for rebellion's sake, but awareness that you, and you alone, are responsible for your being. In today's social media world, Heidegger's warning rings louder than ever. Many live to be seen, not to exist. We curate identities instead of discovering them. Existential authenticity calls for something raw, to face life directly, without filters or borrowed meanings. So think about it. How much of your life is truly yours versus what one does? The Myth of Meaning, Thomas Nagel. Philosopher Thomas Nagel asked, "Why do humans take life so seriously, when on a cosmic scale, nothing we do seems to matter?" His answer, because we can't help it. The absurd doesn't lie in the universe, it lies in us. We demand meaning from a world that doesn't owe it. We know our lives are temporary, yet we act as if every detail matters. This contradiction, our serious attitude in an indifferent cosmos, is the essence of the absurd. But Nagel's insight isn't despairing. He invites us to laugh at the cosmic joke, to see the absurd not as tragedy, but as comedy. Once you accept that your deepest concerns mean nothing to the stars, you're freed from the burden of taking yourself too seriously. Astronauts often experience this during the overview effect, looking back at Earth from space, realizing every war, heartbreak, and triumph happens on a tiny blue speck. The absurd becomes beautiful in its scale. Your crisis feels enormous, until you see it from orbit. From up there, it's just a ripple in the vastness. So tell me, does your crisis feel smaller from space? Ikigai, the Japanese concept of purpose. In Japan, there's a word that describes the reason you get out of bed in the morning, ikigai. It means a reason for being. It's not just about career or success. It's the intersection of four circles: what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. Finding your ikigai isn't about chasing passion blindly, it's about balance. Many people burn out because they pursue money without meaning or purpose without practicality. Ikigai harmonizes both. In Okinawa, one of the world's longest living communities, elders credit their vitality to having ikigai. Whether it's gardening, teaching, or caring for family, their purpose gives them direction long after retirement. In our age of burnout and disconnection, ikigai is a compass. It reminds us that meaning doesn't need to be grand. It can be found in small, daily acts of love and contribution. So, where do your four circles overlap? The pale blue dot, Carl Sagan. In 1990, NASA's Voyager 1 spacecraft turned its camera back toward Earth from 4 billion miles away. What it captured was a single pixel of light, our planet, suspended in a sunbeam. Astronomer Carl Sagan looked at that image and wrote, "Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. Every war, every empire, every saint and sinner, all of human history, played out on that mote of dust." The pale blue dot became a symbol of cosmic humility. From that perspective, the lines we draw, race, religion, nations, melt away. We realize how fragile and precious life truly is. But Sagan's message wasn't nihilism, it was tenderness. Yes, we are small, but that doesn't mean we're insignificant. Our meaning doesn't come from the cosmos, it comes from each other. That single pixel holds everything we love, everything we've ever known. The enormity of space doesn't erase our importance. It deepens our responsibility to care for one another and for the only home we've ever had. So, how do your concerns look from 4 billion miles away? The Meaning Crisis, John Verveek, Contemporary Philosophy. We live in an age of unprecedented comfort, information, and connection, and yet, millions wake up feeling empty. John Verveek calls this the meaning crisis. For most of human history, religion, myth, and community gave people a shared framework of purpose. You knew who you were, what was sacred, and what was expected of you. But modernity dismantled those structures. Science explained the cosmos without God. Consumerism replaced community, and attention became the new currency. The result is a paradox. Our material conditions are better than ever, but our existential state is worse. We have more freedom, yet less direction. Depression, anxiety, and loneliness rise not because people lack comfort, but because they lack coherence. Verveek argues that meaning isn't found. It's made through practices that connect us to something beyond ourselves. But when everything becomes transactional, Even meaning itself turns into a product, sold through self-help books, influencer courses, or spirituality apps. We're searching for wisdom in a world drowning in information. We have replaced the cathedral with the algorithm, the sacred with the viral. The crisis isn't that life has no meaning. It's that we've lost the tools to perceive it. And the haunting question remains, do you have a framework that tells you what matters? Existential isolation, Irvin Yalom, existential psychotherapy. No matter how deeply you love someone, there's a part of you they can never touch. That's the truth Irvin Yalom calls existential isolation. It's not about being physically alone. It's the realization that no one can ever fully experience your inner world. You can describe your pain, your joy, your fears, but no one can feel them exactly as you do. Each human being is, in a sense, a universe sealed inside their own consciousness. That thought is terrifying, but Yalom argues it can also be liberating. Once you accept your existential aloneness, you stop expecting others to complete you. You learn to meet people not to escape loneliness, but to share it. In the modern world, we've confused connection with communication. We scroll through feeds of smiling faces, reply with emojis, and mistake constant contact for genuine closeness. But many of us have felt that strange ache, being surrounded by people, yet feeling utterly unseen. True intimacy begins when we stop pretending our loneliness can be erased and instead allow it to be witnessed. Have you ever felt alone in a crowd? That moment wasn't failure. It was reality whispering the truth of your condition. The feeling of significance. William James, Pragmatism. William James believed that every person, no matter how ordinary, hungers for one thing above all, the feeling of significance. The sense that our actions matter. Without it, life collapses into a gray fog of routine. Meaning, for James, is pragmatic. It's not an abstract concept, but an emotional truth. We want to know that our existence ripples beyond ourselves. Soldiers, artists, parents, activists, all are driven by this same invisible force, the desire to contribute to something larger. When that sense disappears, depression takes root. Not because we suffer, but because our suffering feels pointless. In today's world, we chase validation instead of significance, likes instead of legacy. But James would remind us, feeling significant doesn't require fame or success. It arises when our actions align with values we truly believe in. A teacher shaping young minds, a janitor keeping spaces clean, a friend listening to another's despair. Each carries the quiet heroism of significance. The question isn't whether the world notices what you do, it's whether you believe your life makes a difference. What are you part of that's bigger than yourself? The death of God, Nietzsche, the gay science. When Nietzsche declared God is dead, he wasn't celebrating atheism. He was diagnosing a cultural catastrophe. For centuries, God was the source of morality, purpose, and order. But as science, secularism, and modern philosophy advanced, belief collapsed. Humanity had killed its own foundation. Nietzsche saw this not as liberation, but as an existential earthquake. Without a divine anchor, everything becomes relative. Good and evil blur. Purpose dissolves. The modern world inherits freedom without guidance, a terrifying inheritance. Yet Nietzsche also saw opportunity in the void. With the death of God, we are forced to become creators of our own values. He warned that if we fail to replace divine meaning with self-created meaning, nihilism will devour us. And perhaps that's exactly what we see today. People searching for new gods in ideology, identity, or consumption. The challenge Nietzsche posed still echoes. If there is no cosmic author, who writes your story? Cosmic Insignificance Therapy, Oliver Burkeman, Contemporary Philosophy. Oliver Burkeman offers a counterintuitive cure for anxiety. Remember how small you are. Cosmic Insignificance Therapy invites you to step outside the narrow theater of your worries and see yourself from the scale of the universe. From that vantage point, your mistakes, ambitions, and fears shrink into cosmic dust. This isn't meant to depress you. It's meant to free you. Because if your existence barely registers in the infinite vastness of time and space, then why not live boldly? Why not take the risk, speak your truth, pursue what truly matters? Berkman's insight turns insignificance into liberation. The pressure to live the perfect life fades when you accept that no one will remember your failures 100 years from now. Your legacy isn't a monument, it's a moment, lived sincerely. So next time anxiety grips you, picture Earth as Carl Sagan did, a pale blue dot drifting in the dark. Then ask yourself, what would you do if you knew no one would remember it? The sublime, Edmund Burke, Immanuel Kant, aesthetics. There's a kind of beauty that terrifies us. The sight of a stormy ocean, a vast mountain range, or a night sky spilling with stars. It's not merely pleasant. It's overwhelming. Burke and Kant called this the sublime, an aesthetic experience where fear and wonder merge. The sublime reminds us of our smallness in the face of vastness, yet paradoxically, it elevates us. We sense our fragility and our capacity to comprehend it. Standing before nature's immensity, the ego dissolves. You feel yourself vanish into something ancient, eternal, and infinite. In the modern world, we rarely experience the sublime. Our screens flatten mystery into pixels. But when we step into wild nature, or even a cathedral's silence, the feeling returns. Awe that stretches the soul. Studies now show that moments of or reduce stress, increase generosity, and restore perspective. When did you last feel awe so deep it made yourself disappear? The Eternal Questions, Paul Gauguin. In 1897, painter Paul Gauguin wrote these questions on one of his masterpieces. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? They are the oldest questions humanity knows, and the only ones that never stay answered. Philosophers, prophets, and poets have spent millennia trying to solve them. But perhaps Gauguin's genius was not in answering, but asking. To live is to dwell inside these questions, not to conquer them. We crave certainty, an answer to who we are and why we are here. But life resists being solved like a puzzle. The wisdom of existential thought is that meaning isn't a destination, it's a posture. To live authentically is to walk forward while holding uncertainty in one hand and wonder in the other. Rilke once wrote, "Live the questions now." Because maybe the point isn't to know the truth, but to be transformed by the search itself. Can you live into a question without needing to solve it? Purpose through contribution. Alfred Adler, Individual Psychology. Alfred Adler, a student of Freud who broke away to forge his own path, believed that meaning arises not from pleasure or power, but from contribution. He called it Gemeinschaftsgefühl, social interest, or the feeling of being useful to others. Adler noticed that people trapped in inferiority, those who feel small or inadequate, often try to dominate others to prove their worth. But true strength, he said, comes from belonging, not superiority. A person finds purpose when they stop asking, "What can I get?" and start asking, "What can I give?" Modern psychology confirms this. People who volunteer, mentor, or nurture others report higher life satisfaction and lower depression. Even in workplaces, purpose correlates less with salary and more with perceived impact. Adler saw contribution as the antidote to alienation. When you realize that your life touches others, that your existence is useful, the void begins to fill. Meaning is not discovered in isolation, it's built in relationship. Who needs what only you can give? I-thou versus I-it, Martin Buber, I and thou. Martin Buber believed that all human relationships can be divided into two fundamental modes, I-thou and I-it. In an I-it relationship, we treat others as objects, means to an end. We categorize, analyze, and use them for our purposes. The cashier becomes a transaction, the colleague a stepping stone, the friend a source of validation. Most of modern life, Buber argued, is lived in this mode. It's efficient but hollow. The I-thou relationship, however, is entirely different. It's not about using or observing, it's about meeting. When you relate to someone as a thou, you encounter them in their full humanity. You're not trying to get anything. You're simply with them, present, open, vulnerable. This kind of connection cannot be forced. It happens in rare moments of genuine presence. Think of a conversation where time dissolves. A look of understanding between two strangers. The silence shared between lovers. These moments are sacred because they reveal the infinite within the ordinary. But the tragedy of modern society is that we've turned connection into a commodity. We network instead of relate. We engage instead of listen. Social media has made people products, i.e. relationships on a global scale. Buber reminds us, to see someone as thou is to honor the spark of the divine within them. It's to look beyond what they do for you and see who they are. Who do you treat as thou, and who as it? The look, Jean-Paul Sartre, being and nothingness. Imagine sitting alone in a room. You are completely free, lost in your own thoughts, unseen, unjudged. Then suddenly, someone walks in and looks at you. In that instant, everything changes. You become aware of yourself. You feel seen, and not entirely in control. That's the look, as described by Jean-Paul Sartre. Sartre believed that being seen by another person transforms you. Their gaze turns you into an object, something to be evaluated, categorized, perhaps even condemned. You lose your pure subjectivity. You start to wonder, what do they think of me? This dynamic shapes every social interaction. The gaze of others defines much of who we think we are. In the age of cameras, followers, and constant visibility, Sartre's insight feels prophetic. We live in the era of the look. Social media is the digital panopticon, a world where everyone is both watcher and watched. The anxiety of performance, the pressure to appear successful, happy, beautiful, comes from this awareness of being seen. Our lives become curated exhibitions. We stop being and start appearing. Sartre's point isn't that we should hide from others, but that we must understand how their gaze influences our identity. Only then can we reclaim some of our freedom, to act, not to perform. How do you change when you know you're being watched? Mitgefühl, compassion, Arthur Schopenhauer, ethics. Arthur Schopenhauer, often remembered as one of philosophy's great pessimists, believed that compassion, Mitgefühl in German, was the foundation of all true morality. For him, morality wasn't about following rules or seeking rewards in the afterlife. It was about feeling. Schopenhauer argued that suffering is the common thread of all existence. To live is to struggle, to crave, to hurt. Yet most people are trapped in the illusion of separateness. They see only their pain, not others. Compassion pierces that illusion. It's the moment you realize that another's suffering is not foreign, it's yours too. This is an empathy, which is often emotional mimicry. Compassion is deeper. It's the recognition of shared being. When you help someone out of genuine compassion, you're not helping an other. You're helping yourself in another form. In our hyper-individualistic world, compassion has become both harder and more necessary. Constant exposure to suffering through media can desensitize us, what some call compassion fatigue. But Schopenhauer would insist that without compassion, civilization decays. It's the glue that holds humanity together. So the question is not whether you care, it's how you care. Whose suffering do you truly feel, and whose remains abstract? The Hedgehog's Dilemma, Arthur Schopenhauer, Human Relationships. Schopenhauer gave us another brilliant metaphor about human connection, the hedgehog's dilemma. On a freezing night, a group of hedgehogs huddle together for warmth. But as they get closer, their sharp quills prick one another. So they move apart to avoid pain. But then the cold returns. They shuffle closer again, repeating the painful cycle until they find a distance that's close enough to warm, but far enough not to wound. That's us. We crave intimacy, yet we fear the hurt it brings. Love exposes our vulnerabilities. Friendship invites disappointment. The closer we get, the sharper the risk of pain. In psychology, this dilemma mirrors attachment theory. Some people stay too far, afraid of rejection. Others cling too tightly, afraid of abandonment. Both responses are ways of managing the same fear, the fear of being hurt. In our digital age, we've built a new kind of distance, connection without closeness. We text instead of talk, scroll instead of touch. The screen becomes our quill-proof barrier. But behind that safety lies coldness, the slow freezing of emotional warmth. The art of relationship lies in finding your distance, not isolation, not suffocation. To be close enough to love, yet brave enough to accept the inevitable sting. Are you too close or too far from the people you love? Agape, Christian philosophy, selfless love. Agape is perhaps the highest form of love ever conceived, a love that asks for nothing in return. In Christian philosophy, agape means selfless, unconditional love, the kind that gives simply because giving is right. Unlike eros, which desires, or philia, which reciprocates, agape simply is. It's not a feeling that comes and goes. It's an act of will, a conscious choice to want good for another, even when it costs you. Jesus embodied this love when he said, "Love your enemies." It's not about liking someone or agreeing with them. It's about recognizing their humanity, even when they fail to recognize yours. In the modern world, where relationships often operate on transaction, I'll give you love if you give me something back, agape feels radical. But it's also what makes love enduring. Parental love that stays through sleepless nights. A friend's loyalty through your worst moments. A caregiver's devotion to someone who may never say thank you. Agape doesn't depend on feelings, it creates them. It transforms not only the one who receives, but also the one who gives. Because to love without conditions is to touch the divine within the human. Who do you love regardless of what they give you? The other as mirror, Jacques Lacan, psychoanalysis. When Jacques Lacan said that we find ourselves in the reflection of another, he wasn't being poetic, he was being diagnostic. From infancy, we learn who we are by how others react to us. A smile tells us we're loved. A frown tells us we're wrong. A lack of attention tells us we're invisible. Lacan called this the mirror stage, the moment a child recognizes their reflection and says, "That's me." But this me is only an image, something seen, not something known. The self is formed not in isolation, but in the eyes and gestures of others. You think you know who you are, but imagine stripping away every reflection. Your friend's approval, your parents' expectations, the likes on your posts, the tone of someone's voice when they say your name. Without these mirrors, your sense of self begins to blur. That's the hidden truth of Lacan's insight. You are never just you. You are the echo of how others have seen you. In the modern world, this reflection has multiplied into thousands of screens. Social media has turned mirrors into surveillance, where every move, every opinion, every photo becomes part of your self-image. The more others see you, the more you exist, but also, the more fragile that existence becomes. Because if your reflection disappears, do you? Who are you when no one reflects you back? Ubuntu, African philosophy. I am because we are. In the Western world, identity is often a fortress built on independence, autonomy, and personal achievement. But in many African traditions, that's an illusion. Ubuntu says, I am because we are. It means your humanity isn't something you possess alone, it's something you share. To be human is to recognize the humanity of others. Ubuntu isn't about losing yourself in the group. It's about realizing that your well-being and others' well-being are intertwined. When someone in your community suffers, you are diminished. When someone thrives, you are uplifted. The philosopher Desmond Tutu often said that Ubuntu teaches us compassion not as charity, but as recognition. You help others not because you're kind, but because you're incomplete without them. In today's world, where loneliness, competition, and polarization divide us, Ubuntu offers a radical correction. It reminds us that justice isn't just about fairness. It's about healing relationships. It shows up in movements like restorative justice, where instead of punishment, people sit face to face and rebuild the web that's been torn. Ask yourself, how do your actions honor the web of relationships you're in? Loneliness versus solitude. Paul Tillich, Existentialism. Paul Tillich made a distinction that most people miss. Loneliness and solitude are not the same thing. Loneliness is the pain of being alone. Solitude is the glory of it. One drains you, the other nourishes you. The difference lies in how you relate to yourself when no one else is around. In loneliness, silence feels hostile. Every tick of the clock reminds you that you're unwanted, unseen, forgotten. But in solitude, silence becomes a companion. It's a space where you can listen to your own thoughts without interruption, where the world stops pulling at you, and you can just exist. The problem is, most people today mistake distraction for connection. We scroll endlessly, text constantly, surround ourselves with noise, all to avoid the rawness of being alone. Yet the people who experience the deepest connections are often those who first learned to befriend themselves. Solitude doesn't mean rejecting others. It means returning to them with something real to give. When you know how to be with yourself, you no longer need others to fill your emptiness. You want them to share your fullness. So ask yourself, when you're alone, are you in good company? The paradox of intimacy, Rollo May, Existential Psychology. Rollo May, one of the fathers of existential psychology, noticed something strange about love. The more we try to merge completely with another person, the less real the relationship becomes. He called this the paradox of intimacy. True closeness depends on separateness. It sounds counterintuitive. We think intimacy means becoming one. But if you dissolve your identity into someone else's, there's no longer a you for them to love. Real intimacy isn't fusion. It's connection between two distinct beings who choose to share a space without erasing each other. This is where so many relationships fall apart. We confuse love with possession, care with control, closeness with dependency. We want to hold the other so tightly that we end up suffocating them or losing ourselves. May suggested that the healthiest relationships are like two trees growing side by side. Their roots intertwine, but they each reach for their own sunlight. In modern terms, this idea echoes through therapy as differentiation, the ability to be connected without losing yourself. It's what allows long-term relationships to survive, creativity to thrive, and individuality to remain intact within love. Can you be fully yourself with someone else present? Dialogue versus debate, David Bohm, Socratic Method. In a world obsessed with being right, physicist and philosopher David Bohm offered a quiet rebellion, the art of dialogue. Unlike debate, dialogue isn't about winning or convincing. It's about thinking together. It's a conversation where no one tries to dominate, and everyone listens with the possibility of being changed. In debate, the goal is to defeat. You prepare counterarguments, wait for flaws, and aim to emerge victorious. But in dialogue, the goal is understanding. You suspend your judgments and let the conversation unfold like a shared exploration. Bohm believed that the problems of the modern world, polarization, ideological conflict, social division, stem from our inability to truly listen. We talk past each other, not with each other. True dialogue requires humility. It demands the courage to say, maybe I'm wrong. It's not soft, it's radical. Because when people genuinely listen, something miraculous happens. Thought itself becomes collective. Ideas evolve not through competition, but through cooperation. Imagine if politics, workplaces, or even family arguments operated this way, where curiosity replaced defensiveness and understanding replaced attack. Humanity might not just communicate better, it might actually think better. When did you last change your mind in conversation? Coincidentia oppositorum, Nicholas of Cusa, Mystical Philosophy. Nicholas of Cusa, a 15th century philosopher and theologian, proposed a breathtaking idea, coincidentia oppositorum, the coincidence of opposites. In God, he said, all contradictions are reconciled. Being and non-being, finite and infinite, motion and stillness, all unite in a reality beyond reason. To human logic, this sounds impossible. How can opposites coexist? But Nicholas argued that our limited minds slice reality into categories, light and dark, good and evil, self and other, when in truth, these are merely two sides of one coin. From a higher perspective, opposites don't cancel each other out, they complete each other. Mystics across cultures have echoed this vision. In Taoism, it's yin and yang. In Hinduism, Shiva and Shakti. In Zen, its form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. All point to a truth that logic can't handle. That wholeness exists only when contradictions are embraced, not resolved. Modern science, too, hints at this. Light behaves as both particle and wave. Time may both exist and not exist depending on the observer. The deeper we go, the more reality refuses to fit our binary molds. Perhaps the highest form of understanding isn't to choose sides, but to hold opposites in the same breath. Can something be both true and false at once? The cloud of unknowing, anonymous, 14th century Christian mysticism. In the 14th century, an anonymous English mystic wrote a book called The Cloud of Unknowing. Its message was simple yet revolutionary. To find God, you must surrender knowledge itself. The author taught that the divine cannot be reached by reasoning, analyzing, or even imagining. It can only be entered through the dark cloud of unknowing. He described the spiritual journey as climbing into a fog where intellect cannot follow. To know God, you must forget everything you think you know about him. The more you unlearn, the closer you come. The cloud isn't ignorance, it's humility. It's standing before mystery with open hands, rather than closed conclusions. This idea speaks powerfully to the modern mind, which worships information. We believe that the more we know, the closer we get to truth. But sometimes, knowledge becomes a wall between us and wonder. The mystic's path invites us to step beyond certainty and rediscover awe, to live comfortably in not knowing. Maybe this isn't just about God, but about life itself. The greatest transformations often happen not when we find the answer, but when we stop demanding one. The cloud is where surrender becomes wisdom, where silence speaks louder than speech, where mystery becomes a friend instead of a fear. What if the answer to your deepest question is learning to live without the answer?